Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Security Boulevard webcast. I'm your host, Charles Collegy. I'm an analyst at Accelerated Strategies Group, and we're going to be talking about Hack My Java Application. And we have our host, Snyk and Red Hat discussing what we're going on. But before we do that, you can please indulge me as we talk about some housekeeping activities. I'm going to talk about our big marker platform here. And if you notice on your right-hand side, there's an area for chat. So there you can reach out to us, to all the speakers and amongst yourselves. And feel free to put down a welcome and where you're from. There's also a Q&A section. So if you have specific questions for Brian or Parang, you can put those in there. And the presentations for today are available in the handout section. Now, we're also going to be giving out at the end of the session 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stay around and see if your name is called. And if you are one of the winners, you will receive an email from the email that you registered with on information on how to collect the prize. Now, we are recording this session so that you can go back and watch it on demand. You're going to receive, again, another email when this is over, giving you the location. But if you don't get that email, or if you want to just go to securityboulevard.com, it will be available there for you. And you can share it with others, and I would encourage you to do that. So we're going to have a live hacking session, a demonstration, and you know how that always goes on these activities. So it will be a challenge, I'm sure, for Brian Vermeer, who's the Java champion and developer advocate at Snyk, who again is our sponsor today, and Parang Dave, who is a product manager at Red Hat. So they're going to talk about vulnerabilities, exploits, how the open source and developers work. So I'm really looking forward to how we're going to hack my Java application. And so with that, I'm going to pass it on to Brian. Again, everyone, keep up on the chat, put questions in there, and we hopefully will have time for questions. But again, as a full-time demo, you never know what's going to happen with the event. Yeah, so with that, Brian, Parang,
that will definitely be challenging. But first, we will actually, like every presentation, we'll start with a few slides. So you have to wait until the end, then the action will come in. So bear with us. Parag, I'll leave it up to you for the first part.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So you see what Brian just did, right? He's like, let's just leave the hacking to the very end and keep a small window for it. So that way, if something goes wrong, it's okay. Great, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. This will be a fun event, and we'll have some fun with this. So let me just go over a quick introduction about what is Red Hat's strategy for shift-left application stack security. We're going to talk an overview about the Red Hat CRDA Dependency Analytics and our collaboration with Snyk and how the value it brings for Java developers to the forefront. So we all know about open source. It's the world is so different than it was many years ago. Today, like more than 80% of the source code actually comes from all the open source packages that are included into our application stacks, and then the rest of the code comes from what we write. Wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. So it's amazing. Like, it has radically changed the way we build software. But with that comes certain problems. And not every open source library is created equally. There are going to be vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities could end up affecting our application, even though we were not the ones who wrote that line of code that resulted in the vulnerability. Good news, many of the vulnerabilities actually have fixes available for them. So what we're going to talk about is how do we enable developers to, on their own, just kind of take care of these vulnerabilities, find them, figure out what is the recommended way to remedy them, implement the remediation, and just go back to what we love doing, which is writing code. So our product, Red Hat Corollary Dependency Analytics, it starts with an IDE extension that is powered by a service that is hosted by Red Hat on OpenShift. And it's a backend service where we perform all the analysis. We have all the latest vulnerability information that is integrated with Snyk. And as a developer, you just bring in the IDE extension, you can bring in the APIs, CLIs, and you can analyze your application stack for vulnerabilities. We even provide information about licenses around compliance of how the declared licenses of your application dependencies are aligned with what a declaration of license you have in your package and in your application, just to make sure that you're not bringing in packages which are conflicting with what you have. And as you can imagine, that's a very complicated space as well, because there's so many kinds of open source licenses that and trying to figure out what fits best for you for your application is not that easy. We also bring in data about your maintainability, about the packages you have, so you can tell, like, hey, for all the packages, how well are they maintained, what are the GitHub stats for it, and things like that. You can do all of this from your IDE, so you don't have to ever leave your IDE. Just play in the source code editor. You can get all this data. And we currently support not only Java, but also Node.js, Python, and Golang applications. So dependency analytics has been around for a while. And if we go to the VS Code marketplace and all that, I'll show you how to grab the extension. You will see that it's been around for a while, and we were leveraging NVD for a lot of our CVE data. After our collaboration with Snyk was driven by the desire to upgrade from NVD to Snyk Intel, which is the Snyk's vulnerability database. And the reason behind that was around the broad coverage of vulnerabilities in Snyk Intel versus NVD, so you actually get more vulnerabilities. We got better pinpointed targeted data, like exploitability of a vulnerability, in which version of the package was a vulnerability actually fixed. So it gave us a lot more information that we could then provide back to the developers to make some better decisions, right, about what to do with these vulnerabilities. It covered a large variety of ecosystems that we at Red Hat were interested in, and we believe the developers are interested in. There were no delays in reporting the vulnerabilities, in the sense that the time gap between the vulnerability being discovered and being reported in the database is short. Hence, we can provide information back to the developers as soon as possible, giving you the lead time to kind of fix the the vulnerability in your package. And the last part of it was, we have a data model that we had, and it was very easy to ingest the data feed from Snyk to feed our models. So these are a lot of the key capabilities that kind of drove our desire to leverage Snyk Intel for the vulnerability analysis and not the NVD. Now, when you come into the IDE extension, and Brian's going to do a live demo of this. I'm just going to be very brief in how we cover the data. But it's like you get a nice report, which is what we call a stack analysis report. That's your full report. It shows you things like what are the security issues. You can click, you can expand, you can click on each vulnerability to see what are the the details of it, what are the known exploits about it. We can also get information about vulnerabilities that were uniquely discovered by Snyk. So some of them may already have public CVEs, some may not, but you will actually get a chance to see all those vulnerabilities inside the IDE extension. And then you will be able to see a recommended version. Now, the recommended version is something that we strive to provide as a vulnerability-free version of the package you are using. In most cases, that is available. In some cases, it's not. And then in that case, you can decide whether you want to go to the version in which the vulnerability was fixed, knowing that that version may have its own vulnerabilities going forward. So we try to provide a recommended version, which is actually free of all vulnerabilities. So you'll see all that right there in the report as well. For licensing, you can see, like, hey, what license do we recommend for your application itself based upon the licenses you have brought in, and we can flag certain restrictive, incompatible licenses that you may have, as a part of that. And we're integrated with all the public repositories where we can analyze these licenses that we are providing for you. So, by having the code-ready dependency analytics and with the Snyk integration, what you get is an improved vulnerability analysis versus NVD. You get a much better support for remediation, because you get a combination of recommended versions which are free of vulnerabilities, versions which are actually got fixes, better decision making, because you have a lot of supportive data, like what are the exploits, what are the vulnerability history and all that. So you get much better support, a fully integrated user experience. You're in the report in the IDE extension. You can click. You can get data from Snyk. You can go to a browser. You can click right there. It takes you to a browser tab, shows you the details. Come back into the extension. So it's a very integrated experience versus disjointed. And best of all, it's free. Just go grab it and just start using it. There is no commitment from anything, to actually use the ID extension and the data that is coming from Snyk. So I would say try it out. Now, when you come in, there are two ways, right? One is where it's free, you just keep on using it, and and you can get information from the ID extension and all of that. But if you do register with Snyk, which is free to register, now you can actually get a lot more data directly in the ID extension. For example, you can find out those privately discoverable vulnerabilities with Snyk. You can see the exploit details. You can even register your Git repo, and they can automate the whole analysis and the pull requests to actually apply the fix automatically. So there are a lot of benefits of registering as well, and both of them are free. It's up to you what you're comfortable with, but it's available, and you can just take care of that. To register, when you click on the link, very straightforward. You just come in, you have a drive, you go register for Snyk, you get a token. That token, just enter the token into the ID extension, and you're good to go. That's all we need. And once you're in, all of a sudden the button turns green over here, and you can now see all the exploits and all the details about the vulnerabilities after you save the token. So, and just to show kind of like where we are, like we are headed towards a lot of great analysis of Golangs, and we are going to bring it into for all of you who are in the OpenShift side. We're actually integrating this analysis into OpenShift as well. So now from the OpenShift console, you'll be able to directly see all this data for your pods that are deploying the container images you've created. So here's a bunch of links for you to go grab it depending upon the IDE of your choice, whether you want the CLI, a Tecton task, and yeah, I mean, it's a very popular extension on the VS Code marketplace and on JetBrains. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Brian. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks, Parag. Now I need to do the first thing is always the hardest part is sharing my screen. That in a physical conference you just plug in your laptop and that always works. But hopefully you now see a nice purple screen with my slide deck. Do you see that?
It's loading, and yes, we do.
Okay, amazing. So I will get to you right away because I also have a few somewhat boring slides, but I will get to the hacking right away, just momentarily. What Parag already told you, like everything I will show you over here as well is free. So that means that either you can use it without you doing anything, or you have to register with Snyk so that you can leverage the APIs and in the VS Code extension or the JetBrains extension, you can use all the intel we have. Again, no payment involved whatsoever. But we have to talk about something first, like this word, DevSecOps. And I believe that most of us know what DevOps is, right? Tearing down the walls between developers and operation to make sure that developers own what they build, that they own it in production as well, or the team owns it. Like it's not I build it, I throw it over the wall, and the ops people take care of it. Now it's well, we do it together. We play along like children in the on the playground. But then there's that security part, and let me emphasize on that because that's my name. That's not what I need to do. Security is not so much a first thing that's on the mind of the developer. I mean, what we do is we have developers and operations that we want to get things out fast, better, faster, and stronger every single time, maybe even multiple times a day. But we cut corners on the security edge. And in most cases, it's not on a developer's mind to think on security. I mean, we do a lot on scalability and maintainability and reusability, but security is more or less still a separate thing. With DevSecOps, we try to integrate that in the team, but to make sure to do that, we need to be aware of that. We need to do this, right? Why should I, as a developer or a DevOps person or a full stack, whatever you might call yourself, why should I have to take care about security? Well, I will show you in a second. First, this is me, Brian Vermeer. I'm a Java champion. Do a lot in the communities, mainly on Java, but also some JavaScript, and I work for Snyk. But that's not important because we're going to solve a problem with that DevSecOps mindset. First of all, 10 years ago, I worked for a government agency and we deployed 4 times or 3 times a year. Can you imagine? Nowadays, we might deploy 3 times a day because, hey, we fix things, we push it to production. CI, CD all the way. Point is, because we think on features and getting that feature out before the competitor, it's not so much security mindset. Because, hey, all tests are green and my tests are all, well, feature-wise functional and they work, ship it. But point is, we do have a lack of security focus through the whole pipeline. And that is because security is still a siloed expertise at the end of the pipeline. Well, just like developers and operations were separate before, security is still separate in many cases. And hopefully at the end of your 2-week sprint, there is a security person looking at your stuff and saying, hey, you have a problem. But that means it sets you back for 2 weeks and you need to do it all over again in the worst case scenario. And even worse, if it's already in production and somebody finds out, you might need to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. Well, if we take care of this from the beginning, just like we do with maintainability and scalability nowadays, it might not be such an issue, because in the end, we need to make sure that our customer data is not compromised, because you don't want to be the next big headline in the newspaper, or do you? I mean, okay, how bad is that situation? I will give you one example. Remember 2017? That was only 2021 now, 4 years ago. A lot of you are probably based in the United States and heard of a company called Equifax. And Equifax, I'm not going into the company because that's not the issue. It's the problem that I want to solve. The problem is Equifax built their business logic on top of, well, Apache Struts 2. And Apache Struts 2 is basically a framework that lays the foundation for your application. It does a lot of plumbing for you, and you just build your business logic on top of that, similar to Quarkus or Spring Boot or whatever these applications you might use. The problem is in this dependency, because they depended on top of this, they didn't know that this particular version was vulnerable. There was a vulnerability found, already disclosed, and there was a new version out. But because, like a lot of other companies, we're looking at new features instead of what's already in production, people find out that they were using that malicious version or that version with a vulnerability. People came in, snooped around for months. I don't know how long, to be honest, but I can imagine it can be weeks or months if you're not paying attention. And in the end, over 140 million customers, US customers, were compromised and their data was out in the open. And that is not something that you want. But let's get into that hack, because that is the interesting part, right? What happened? Like, I have an application over here, and this is not important like what the application is, but this application is a Java application, and I currently chose for the one that I have on Heroku because I have it, and it runs. Cool. I don't have to get into the application because it's the dependencies. It's not so much the business logic. So I will do what every single hacker would normally do, put a hoodie on. Cannot find it, I'm sorry. So I will go into my terminal, because there's no fun in doing this from a browser, right? And you see what I'm going to do here. And let me just clear my screen for a second and put it up. I am going to show you what the problem is. And the problem is a header for a CRUD, or, well, basically an HTTP request. What I will do is I will call in a second. I will call a request towards this application that is on the cloud, and I will give it this content type, which is one of the headers that I can feed it. And as you can see, this content type is weird. This content type is invalid, faulty, or, well, however you might call it, is not a valid content type. And long story short, what happens here is if you supply a invalid content type for this specific version of Apache Struts 2, you get into an exceptional flow. And in that exceptional flow, you are allowed to utilize OGNL. And OGNL is the Object Graph Navigational Language, which is the expression language available in Apache Struts. With this expression language, you are allowed to interfere with the objects that are there. For instance, you can call getters, setters, or do such things. But what you can do as well is you can call new objects. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm calling a new process builder. And I feed this process builder the bash. And this bash, I can feed it an arbitrary command. So then I wrap the input stream to an output stream, or the other way around, and I will show it to you. But the point is, if I can do this, depending on the privileges of the user this application runs, I can do a lot of things that are available now to me, like basically any Linux command that is available to that user that runs that application. So I will just show you. That's easier. Yeah. Let me do the exploits, and I will show you which one I will get the environment variables. It's an easy one. This one. Oh, but it's now, what I do is I use the header I showed you, and I substitute the word command for the word env. And env is just a Linux command to show you the environment variables. However, now it says go to localhost 8080, but it's not running on localhost. Nope, it is running on Heroku. So let me just move this away to make it just a little bit more fun. One thing, I didn't test this, so hopefully it works. But if I do this over here and I run it, what you see is that my output stream comes back and shows to me at least partially the environment variables. I see what the Java options are for this instance of my application. I can see what the Java home is and a lot of other things. But if I can do the env command, I probably can do a make directory or create a file or create a script. If I create a script that holds certain things, that downloads maybe a tarball and unzips that or untars the thing, you see that I can do it in different stages. And good luck with finding out in your logs what actually happens if I try this on day 1 and execute on day 3. And this is because they were using a outdated, vulnerable version of Apache Struts, which was already fixed at that point in time. However, we see that we have the Java home over here. Let's keep that Java home in mind. I need it a little bit later to do another hack. So let's get back to the slides. So we see what the problem is with Apache Struts. They built their stuff on top of a vulnerable dependency. And that is just the thing. Be aware that what you're using. For instance, if this is the Java jar or var or the binary that you put into production, how much of the code that you put into production is actually the code you wrote? Think about it. I will not wait for answers, but it's probably something like this. Like, this is the code that you wrote. This is the actual implementation of the business logic. And we probably take good pride of that code because we have code reviews and pair programming and maybe QA analysis on that, all sorts of stuff. But the whole yellow part around it, these are the frameworks and dependencies you pull in. And you know that the framework pulls in another library, pulls maybe in another library, and several layers deep that can go. Are you aware what kind of code or what kind of libraries you pull in? And do you have any strategy around that? Do you just blindly pull it in because Stack Overflow told you so? Or did you actually try to keep that up to date? Because I worked in companies where I saw a Maven POM file where there were 3 different XML marshallers in, and that wasn't even necessary because the JDK owns it. So the point is, a lot of people add stuff and it never gets removed. But let me get into a little bit of numbers game. This is a JavaScript application, and just to make fun of Node, because that's what I'm good at. But the point is, this is 19 lines of serverless code in JavaScript, in Node.js. And what you can see is that it has 2 direct dependencies. But we know that direct dependencies also pull in other dependencies. So 2 direct dependencies in this case come into 19 dependencies. All right? How many lines of code do I put into production? Just guess in your mind. I don't need an answer. You can answer it, no worries. But it's about 200,000 lines of code. So less than 1% of this code is actually the code you wrote. But we are responsible for all of it. And maybe even more because we containerize it for something like that. You get me? But now get to Java. This is a Spring Serverless example. And this Spring Serverless example was horrible because I wrote it and it had 222 lines of code with a lot of duplication. So don't use it. But just to make a numbers game again, it's 5 direct dependencies. And these direct dependencies, well, it's Spring and a lot of other stuff, came back to 54 dependencies in total. And as we know that all these dependencies are on the class path. And everything that is on the class path, unless you're working with the module system, you can cut that out. But say old-fashioned Java class path system, everything is on the class path and can be loaded into memory. So 54 dependencies. How many lines of code will that be? Over 400,000 lines of code. That's a lot. And you're responsible not for the 222 lines, but for the 400,000 something lines. And you saw what happens to the other thing. It's not even business logic. It's the plumbing. It's the foundation. So what we know is that open source usage has exploded over the last decade or 2 decades, basically. But remember that open source is built by you, by me, by open source maintainers that in many cases do this next to their day job or as part of their day job even. They're developers, and developers do make mistakes. So we have to take care of them. We have to nurture them, and we have to be aware that they need to be updated once in a while, or at least we have to know what we're pulling in. Because if there is a problem in an open source dependency that is well maintained, but well used as well, there are a lot of potential victims. So that means that if you're not on top of this, you can be a victim as well. And let's go into some stats on how bad is this. Well, if you see over here, like the new packages created per ecosystem each year, you see that NPM for Node.js is the clear winner. And I think halfway 2019, they were up to over 1 million packages, which is a lot. So that means that if you need to find something, you probably find a dozen of packages that do pretty much the same. And what do you pick? But if you look at Maven Central, even though in 2019 not a lot of new packages came out, everything is on top of what is already existing. So the amount of new packages increase every single year. But also that means that the amount of vulnerabilities will increase every single year. Although between 2018 and 2019, there were less new vulnerabilities, the old vulnerabilities still stay. And if you have something in production that is there for ages, you might want to check that out. And as I told you already, it's not so much the dependencies that you pull in, that you have in your manifest file. No, it is, in many cases, the indirect ones. Because you're using a framework that is based upon another library that has a 3 levels deep, some marshalling or unmarshalling library that might or might not have a serialization issue that can bite you in the end. Because security problems are always chains of attacks. It's not a singular attack and saying, hey, but I have a firewall and nobody will hurt me. Well, if somebody drops that firewall for in some case or misconfigured it, then we got in, maybe we find in something else, we connect all the dots together, and finally, you're bumped. No security issue was just a single one, but it's always a chain of malicious things connected together that end up in, well, kind of a disaster. We asked open source maintainers how confident they are about their own security, and 63% of the people says, kinda. But remember that we do have a lot of things in place like code reviews and pair programming. So we basically say no code will go into production unless a lot of people saw it. But we do blindly import other people's dependencies. Is that fair? And then the $1 million question again, like who should be responsible for security? And in this case, we made a deviation between the software and the infrastructure, because infrastructure nowadays is also infrastructure as code. So we can make mistakes and problems in there as well. But what you can see is on the software side, on the application security side, it is a shared responsibility between the security team, operations, and developers. But we need to take our fair share as a developer. It's not like I'm building it, somebody else will look and see if it's safe or not. We make conscious decisions on what framework and what library we want to use. So just like I trust the people that built this very house I'm standing in, I hope that they made the right decisions to use the right bricks and the right concrete and the right construction. People that use your software to basically do the same. And you should make these conscious decisions as well as a developer, or at least be well informed. Quiz question. Vulnerabilities generally remain undiscovered for a long time. And how much time do you think that on average, well, the median in this case, will take? You probably have a number in your mind that you say like 100 days. Well, it's probably a bit more because it's over 2.5 years. So that means if you have something in production and you didn't dare to touch it because people depend on it, but no team actually owns it anymore, and it is, for instance, outward facing, you might need to take a look and see if there's no vulnerability in there that slipped in. Because what is safe now might be unsafe tomorrow, because people will start digging and keep digging until they find something. And once it is found, disclosed, published, then we are out in the open. Because if I know, because of my scanning tools or the CVE database, or in this case, the Snyk Intel database, malicious people also know, and they will craft an attack. But I promise you to hack. So let's do that. I have 31 minutes. So let's go into first I will do a small JavaScript, a small Node.js application. Just quickly. This is a Node.js application that is a to-do list. And I can say buy flowers because it's almost my wife's birthday, but I can do whatever I want. Like I can make a list. Not interesting. Very not interesting at all. But you see at the bottom there is an about link, and that is a static page. Let me just get that. I'll get rid of that. 1 second. Let's get to that about page. And you see that this is a static about page, and you see that I am a very good UX designer. I mean, the contrast between white and black is brilliant. Everybody can read it, no problem. I can scale it so it works on mobile. That's what we want to do, right? So, but again, this is not the issue. The point is this is a static page served to you by the ST library in Node.js. And the problem is the ST library has a pathoverse problem. Now let me show you what that is. And again, I will go to my terminal and I will enlarge this for you so it's actually visible. Yes. So what I can do a curl on local host 3001. I think it was public and about that HTML. So if I some notes here, you see, I probably mistyped something. Oh, I forgot well, whatever. If we do it like this, if we do a curl command, you see that I will get the HTML back. Nothing fancy. But we know that, or for instance, I know at this point that the library that serves this static page has a pathoversal vulnerability. So what you normally try to do if you want to do a pathoverse, let me enlarge this a little bit more so you can see it better. Normally what you try to do is something like this, .. and we try to break out of the public folder, and we try to break out of the web server and might even get into the bare bone machine, try to get to the root of that system and see if that works. That's what we're trying to do. And if we're in the root and we do .. in the root, we'll end up in the root anyway. So I can do this a gazillion times. However, if I do this, you will see I will get redirected back to my home page because you see over here that is the link to the about page. So what we know for this ST library, it is actually blocking specifically .. It is a block list. And if I know that it blocks specifically .. maybe I can be a little bit smarter. And the smart solution in this case, I will shortcut it. Normally I will ask people for suggestions, but it's this. This is the URL encoding for a dot. And doing this 2 times is this is .. And if I duplicate this a bunch of times, and I'm lazy, so I do the copy paste method, you'll see that I am in the root of my local host in the current system. This is interesting, but people say, okay, Brian, but you can read. Who cares? Well, I can read files like etc/patchwd, and now I can see what's in there, which is not really important. But if I can read this file, I can probably read other files. And this is the beginning of a journey. Now I can investigate and see if you have a property file over there with the URL to a database and maybe a secret token. Or this is not open source software, but closed source. And I can just break out of the public folder. So do over here, and it's Node.js. So I can see that the package.json is here. Interesting. Package.json. And now I can see what all your dependencies are. And I know that the ST library was vulnerable, but the MS library is vulnerable as well. And Moments is vulnerable. There's an old version, jQuery. And I can look this up. I can just Google, make it an afternoon of Googling, and I will find out a bunch of exploits that I can do. Moreover, JavaScript is an interpreted language, right? So what I can do as well, I can go into the actual code that is on there. So I can go to the app.js and see what kind of code is there. For instance, somebody secretly forgot, well, unpurposely forgot to delete the secret token. But you get me. Reading is one thing, but now you can do, like now we know have more information, and we can continue our attack. This is just the beginning, and I will just leave it at there for my JavaScript application, because remember that Java application I showed you a few minutes ago, like this one? Well, let me just see if it works. Let's sign up for this. And I will sign up for this with my name and my email. and a password 123456 because I work at a security company and this is perfectly safe. Don't do this. But I will sign up. No, don't save this in my password vault. My boss won't like me anymore. But again, it's a to-do list. And this to-do list, what I can do with this to-do list, I can create a to-do. And let me do something funky. Let me do here, eat pie with a pie sign. Put it somewhere in 9070, and well, it's up there so long, so I might be hungry now, so give it a high priority. If I create this, you will see that the title is not the pie sign anymore. It is eat and the ASCII representation. And the ASCII representation is there because this title goes to the native to ASCII function, which is natively part of the JDK. It is there. It's just there, and you can just give it a symbol, and it will give the ASCII representation. Or you can give it anything, and if it's if it will give you the ASCII representation if that is needed. Okay, that's a fun feature. Keep that one in mind. Also, we can upload files, and this will all connect together in a second. And I can upload zip files. But what if my zip file looks like this? So we remember the Java home over here, like the /app/.jdk, right? We know something with native to ASCII and a zip file. Well, what if my zip file, zip info, looks like this? This zip file contains two files, like a good.txt, which is just a regular file, and a /app/.jdk, which was the Java home of this instance, /bin/native to ASCII. What I want to do is, while zipping this, I'm trying to do that path traversal I showed you in that Node.js problem. I will go into the Java home, and there's the native to ASCII file, and instead of putting it in the public folder what I want it to be, I try to override something that is there on the JDK. And that is interesting, because in Java, there's no such thing as a unzip function in the JDK. We have the building blocks, like we can inspect the zip file, we can see what zip entries in there, but we still need to unzip or do the unzipping ourselves or create new files and give it the byte arrays. So I use a library for that. And in this case, a library that is a bit outdated. Let me show you what happens if I just do this. So let's go to this one. It was not in the code demo. It was in 1 second. Java goof. There. Zip. So I'm uploading the zip file, and I see that the good.txt is there in my public folder. I know for a fact that it unzipped because that was one of the things in my zip file, right? But what did it do next? What happened? I don't know. But let's create another to-do. And put in a date. Doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what priority it is, because now every single title is muhaha gotcha. Just to prove it, I put a new one in and just put in some gibberish. Again, give it a, and you see that everything is muhaha gotcha because I overrode the native to ASCII file with basically the C command echo muhaha gotcha. So everything that comes in ends with muhaha gotcha. And that is because this library didn't sanitize the input. It didn't look at the path at this point. It didn't look at the canonical path, because if you look at the canonical path, like .. will traverse you back, but the canonical path is a real path. And if the canonical path would start with the location that you want your stuff to be in, like the public folder, like you saw with the good.txt, then it wouldn't be a problem. But if you just blindly just take it and put the files over there, you're overriding a file that's already there. And that is interesting because now I have the power to override everything. Just like this. And this is behavior that you don't want to. And that's because you implemented, or in this case, I implemented a library that is outdated. There is a new version out. When this came up, this version was already found and fixed. And this is not something that is very old. Well, this ZT library is a few years old. But the same happened to, for instance, the unzip library from Spring that was there. And I think it was even like early this year when they had a similar kind of problem. So all these things end up in old libraries, but all again in new libraries as well. It's not because it's old, it's wrong. New libraries can have the same issue as well. I am at the 40-minute mark, so I will have one more thing to show you, and we are going to show and kind of fix it in the same process. So I have another application, and I have this application in my VS Code over here. And this is an application which is a Java code workshop. It's a workshop I created some time ago, and let's just run it. I am using my terminal over here, and let me just MCPS for me on my machine is just maven clean package skip tests because I'm lazy. So I'm just creating another package of it. Da-ba-dee-da, cool. So I can do a maven spring boot run. And hopefully it runs. Always pray to the demo gods that things will run. But so far, so good, right? Okay, it runs. And I will go back to my thing over here and do a localhost 8080. Yes, I got it. So what is this? This is a simple application that contains users. And this user has a username, a first name, a last name, and a comment. And you see that I put in some of my favorite superheroes. However, one of these things, there are a lot of vulnerabilities over here. But one of the things, it can import things. It can import things. And I say choose your XML file. But what it can also import is the most horrible language ever, which is YAML. But YAML is also a language where you can use to serialize and deserialize data, just like JSON, just like XML. And if I go and I show you what the YAML is for a new user, that would be something like this. I hope you can all see it. It is 2 users, and I add 2 new users, Matt Murdoch and Dick Grayson. Easy. And this works. I will just show you. Like, choose the file. Oh, yes. Oh, now I need to go to the other one, of course, because it takes the last application, the code workshop, the examples, and I take users.yaml. So by doing this, and I submit it, it will just add 2 users. So you see YAML works. Great. Cool. YAML is more readable and less verbose than XML. Just make sure that you have enough white spaces. However, YAML has another thing, and YAML has a problem with, YAML has a feature that can use, just like XML, by the way, that can use anchors. And what if I make something like this? And I will enlarge it a little bit. This is perfectly legitimate YAML. And what it does is I have a variable, and that variable can contain an anchor, which is a link. And my first lol1 contains a list of strings 10 times lol. Cool. Then lol2, which also has an anchor on itself, but is a list of lol1s. So this one is 10 times lol, this one is 10 times lol, etc., etc., etc. So I do that over and over again. So list within list within list within list within list. What happens is if I deserialize YAML like this, and in a kind of a naive way, and I use a library, I use a Snyk YAML for this, the wrong version, the outdated version, then if I try to deserialize it, there are a lot of objects that will come into memory, which eventually can call a out-of-memory exception. So if I do that for the users, and I did it over here, I just did the same, but instead of the first name of the second user, I just refer to lols. That will basically enrich it and make sure that lols will get evaluated, and lol9 and lol8 and lol7, lol6, etc., etc., and all these things will get into memory. So let me just try that. And what we will see is if I import the left2 over here and I submit it, it will take a bunch of time because all these objects will get into memory. And at a certain point in time, it will just burst. It will burst because my heap is full. And now that is not a real problem for a single user, but I bet you if you're using this and you create an application, it's not for a single user like this. It's probably for multiple users, maybe thousands or 10,000 users. However, that's the wrong thing. And we already got it over here. Like you see that it's a Java heap space issue out of memory. And let me show you that it basically returned me a, oh, where's my browser? A 500. And it still runs, but my heap was compromised, or it was full, and it just needed to dump the stuff. But if there's some stuff in that you need for customers, they'll lose their data. If I do this a lot of times, you get into a denial of service because it's not available anymore. If you work on the cloud, that might mean that it's not a denial of service, but a new instance spins up or a new pod spins up, and another one, and another one, and another one, which drains your funding. So either way, you don't want this. But as I told you, it is a problem that I created because I have a dependency that is not really up to date. So let me just go to the Dependency Analytics report in VS Code. And it now tries to resolve all the application dependencies, send it over to Snyk, and it will give me a nice report. And there's not very much wrong with this application, except for the coding. Let me just get it a little bit smaller so you can see a little bit more. And what you can see, for instance, is I'm using Snyk YAML over here, which has one direct vulnerability. And let me see what happens if I say over here, details, dependency, org YAML, Snyk YAML, current version 124, recommended version 127. Unproven. Well, I just proved it. We need to change that. I proved that this is right. However, I want to fix this. And this is one thing that is actionable for you as a developer. It's not just, hey, you're doing something wrong, but we have a recommended fix for you, which helps me save it. Let me save the day. And you see over here that in my POM file, over here, let me just enlarge this a little bit. You see that I declared Snyk YAML over here. And already the Dependency Analytics plugin, and I connected it to Snyk, so I have all the information with my free account. I only have a free account. I'm not having a paid account because I don't need it. But what I can do, I can quick fix it. So if I go to quick fix, switch to recommended 127, fixed. Right? So this is easy. And even though it might be a dependency that is transitive or is connected to something in a parent POM that you might inherit, you might not be able to do this right away with everything, but you have the complete dependency report that shows you what all the dependencies in your application have. I can show you now that it doesn't work anymore, but I trust me that you believe me in this because, well, I tried it. This one I did try. However, for the sake of time, we have about 13 minutes left, if I'm not mistaken. Let's get back to what we actually want to resolve with this, because hacking is fun, but I'm not a hacker. We created this on purpose to show you what the actual issue is and why we need to take care of this as a developer. So getting back to the presentation. So let's hack. We did some hacking. I have more if we have time left, but I'm sure that we don't. What is the solution? The solution is actually 3 ways. And bottom line, it's not only the tooling you use. It is a combination of culture. And I say team culture, but it can be the culture within your company as well. So culture, process, and tooling. And all these things are important. And if you don't start with the culture and then the process, but you start with the tooling right away, it will not be accepted. Trust me. Because, first of all, culture. We work with a lot of different people, developers, security people, operations managers, and more. Like nowadays, we've got a job title for everybody from Scrum Master to whatever it might be, but let's just keep to these 4. And developers, they want to build features. They love to work on new stuff, create new stuff with new interesting frameworks. We are builders. I'm a developer myself. We build stuff, and that's what we're good at. The security people, like old-fashioned only security people, they just want to make sure that you are secure, not getting breached. That is their KPI. If your stuff doesn't go to production, it's not unsafe. So, okay, cool, done. Operations, general operations people think about how simple is deployment, scalability, is it predictable? What happens if the building is on fire? Do we have another data center? Is it in the cloud? Spins it up? Does it spin up automatically, etc.? Managers, they think about, make sure that you deliver, and is it profitable? Do we make money? But if we think in, actually, we're all part of the same team. So if we have, instead of separate KPIs, make sure that we have a common API, a common KPI. If a manager helps you, that you have the time to educate yourself, but also get rid of your technical debt and make sure that you are aware of security things, like doing some of these, like what you're doing now. Thank you for being here, by the way. That is already a first step. So making sure that it's interesting enough and that it's part of your work instead of only features. But as a developer, we need to think in a security mindset as well. Instead of getting it like down the road at the end, I want to have it right away, like in my application or in my IDE or in my terminal, whatever. Just like my unit test, I want this feedback early and often so I know that it is safe and the probability that it will get to production is high. So that is the first thing, not separated, but altogether one goal. Then we go to process, and it's not like you need to create more process. We all know that, right? Here you've got an enormous list and you have to check every box before you can go to production. That does not work. Nobody wants that. But what if instead of new practices, I can integrate stuff with the stuff the way you already work? So if you work in a certain way and we have and there is tooling that can connect to that helps you instead of breaks you, that enriches the information and that helps you fix things, that's already a step forward. So you need to pick the tooling that it fits your process. And automation is something that is involved as well. Make sure that a lot of things are automated. For instance, scanning, and if it's already in production, maybe you want to get pinged if some new vulnerability is found. And not only that you make a problem, that you have a problem, but also what is a probable fix, right? That's helpful. So what we want to say is we need to DevSecOps your pipeline. Well, the correct term is your software development lifecycle. So when you code, for instance, what I do in VS Code with the Code Ready dependency analysis tool, like see what my dependencies do, but also maybe look at your code, like both of them. But the majority was the dependencies we already saw. But okay, I already caught some problems over there. Let's go to source control. When I just committed to my master branch, why not just connect your repository like GitHub or Bitbucket to our testing facilities, and we test it on a daily basis. And if something new comes up, we will create an automatic pull request for you that say, hey, let's update from 126 to 127. You just have to click merge or not, whatever fits your process. That is the most important, your process. Then, for instance, if we build that stuff and we have a new pull request in, you want to make sure that you do not get worse. Like a certain amount of vulnerabilities might be comfortable for you, which is okay. I mean, zero vulnerability is probably something you want to achieve, but it's utopia. However, you do not want to get worse. So every pull request scan it. But also, before you go into production and you have your CI pipeline like Jenkins or Tecton over here, but you can also say like GitHub Actions or Circle C. It doesn't. I don't care which one but scan over there. Make sure that before you go to production, you are aware that you are on a comfortable level of vulnerabilities. Preferably zero, but you can break your pipeline if you want to, and support the necessary information to fix it. Then you go to production, and you might do container building and do that. Make sure that you scan that container as well, because operating system vulnerabilities, that layer also might get into problems, but that's a whole different talk. Trust me. But when you deploy to production, and it doesn't matter where you go, make sure that you monitor it. For instance, with the Snyk monitoring tool, what you do is you say Snyk monitor, for instance, with the CLI, and we take, well, let me make it simple. We take a snapshot of what is the dependency tree that goes into production, and we scan it on a daily basis until you deploy a new one, of course. But if we scan it on a daily basis and a new vulnerability got found, you get actively pinged by email or by Slack, or maybe integrated with your Jira board, whatever, again, fits your process. And that is actively responding to problems and making sure that it fits your process and it doesn't break you, but help you. So because that production is just as important, we saw the problem with Equifax in the beginning of this presentation. Make sure you do it there as well. Just don't say it like, hey, it's in production. Now it's not my case anymore, because we do DevOps, because we do DevSecOps. We need to take care of that point as well. We say shift left. And shift left, we mean like as left as possible over here. Start early at the coding phase on your local machine of your developers, like what I just did. for all of you guys, start scanning from the beginning and do it all the way up to production. And it's actually not shifting left. It's a continuous flow, which is endless because, well, we tend to work in an agile way and it's never done. However, this is basically what I have to tell. If you have any questions, we'll probably have it in the Q&A section, but I cannot see it on my screen right now. So thank you. If you come up with questions afterwards, feel free to ping me on Twitter or send me an email. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Brian. That was very entertaining. And I'm not even I'm a security guy, not a developer, and this was really kept me going. I can't believe the amount of dependencies in the lines of code. That's just crazy in many ways, and I can see where the security issues come into play in those situations.
And it's not always a bad thing, but you just have to be aware that it's not only the code that you write that you're responsible for. I did like for a presentation, I think 6 months ago, I did a live demo on let's create an application, which is just a hello world application with one of the major frameworks in Java, and see how many lines of code it was. Like I wrote 4 lines of code, like literally the hello world REST endpoint. And I think it was over 500,000 lines of code that brought to production because, well, it's basically a whole web server that you just put in the air. But every single line of code might not be important, but is your responsibility.
Right. And I do like the where you talked about the team culture and the process and the tools, because that's exactly what I talk about security all the time. It's people, process, and technology, right? So we hear that all the time. So it's nice to see that DevSecOps really is just doing the same thing that we're doing everywhere else. And I want to remind everyone that because this was a demo situation, you're going to want to go back and listen to it again and see what the code is. And so you will be receiving an email that will tell you where to find it on Security Boulevard. But if you don't, it is on Security Boulevard. It will be there shortly. So remind you with that. I want to make sure I announce our 4 winners of the $25 Amazon gift cards. And again, so Stefano B, James W, George G, and Sam K. You will be receiving an email from the email that you registered with that will give you the information on how to collect. And with that, I want to thank Brian for, again, very entertaining, for Parang for being here and being pretty much Brian's shadow. He didn't give you a lot of time to talk. And
he had the more fun, for sure. That was fun.
Yes. And I want to thank the audience for being here and sticking with us. And with that, unless Brian and Parang have anything to say, we're going to sign off for this afternoon.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity as well, Charles and Jade. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you at the next Security Boulevard webinar.
Yep. Thanks.
Bye.